All right, good morning, guys. So here's the dough mixer. Now, I've had to buy a trolley for it because it's just too heavy to be lifting up and down from the counter, from the floor to the counter every time. So you can see it's a nice little machine. You've seen my unboxing from the other day. So you can see it's quite a nice little machine. I'll just spin it around so you can see the controls. So here's your controls. So this is your on button. So it lights up when you turn it on, and your speed dial and your emergency stop. So your speed dial, when it starts, so it starts kicking in once you sort of go past the 1 to the 2. And then, so it's not really like a set 1, 2, 3, 4 through to 10 speed. It's more like a variable speed. So you can get actually more than 10 speeds. So you can sort of, I don't know if the sound comes through on the video, but you can hear it speeding up. So what I'll do is I'll show you in the bowl with the actual spiral. So what I'll do is, so inside the bowl, if you want to see the hook and what it looks like, just for better detail. So you can see the breaker bar. It's a solid piece of stainless steel. There's about maybe a 0.5 centimeter gap between the bottom of the bowl and the top of the pole. Or sorry, the bottom of the pole. And you can see how it's mounted, directly bolted onto the bottom of the body. So here's the speeds. So I'll start slowly turning it so you can see what it looks like. So this is once it hits, hold on, sorry, I've got to have the, that's the other thing. If this isn't down, the shield or the net, nothing works. So it does that as you go past 1, where it sort of jumps, and this is on about 2. And that's what it looks like. And the bowl's spinning as well. So you can see the arrow, how slow it spins. That's on the setting of 2. So as you turn it up, it will just get faster and faster. So it's really more than 10 speeds. So you can see it slowly. That's on 3. That's 3.5. That's on 4. That's 5. But to give you an idea, that's 5. That's 4. But I don't know if you can hear it, but you've got a few different speeds. So I'll go from 4 to 5 so you can see what I mean. That's on 5. That's 6. 7. That's 8. 9. And that's essentially 10. So between 9 and 10, there's no difference in the speeds. But you can see how fast it goes. And that's back down to 4. And then if I go around to the side, emergency stop, and it stops everything. Now to disengage the emergency stop, you've got to twist it and it pops out. Then you've got to bring it back down to 0, and then if you start turning it, it goes back. So that's the operation of it. It's quite straightforward. And that's why I purchased the variable speed one, because you can control basically what speed it operates. So if you want to do higher hydrations, doughs, you can do that. Where there's the single speed ones, from what I've read, obviously don't perform well when it comes to high hydrations. So today I'll be mixing a pizza dough. It'll be a 1 kilo flour a batch. So what I'll do is I'll show you the ingredients that I'm going to be using. So what I've done is I've got 2 pre-fermented doughs. The first one is Biga. So I'll show you the Biga. So it's just your normal sort of hand mixed. So this is 200 grams of W300 rated flour, and I've just put in 2 grams of dry yeast and 100 mils of cold water, and I've let it sit at room temperature for 5 hours and then overnight in the fridge. So I've just pulled it out of the fridge, so it's still quite cold. Now the flour that I've used for this one is the Molini Pizzuti Costa d'Amalfi. So I'll show you the bag if you want to know what flour I'm using. I'm not showing you the recipe for the purpose of you getting a recipe. It's just more so you know what I'm doing when it comes to mixing the dough and how it performs, because a lot of the videos I've seen online where people are mixing dough, they give you basics, but I like to know what the flour is, the ratios of everything, just so then I can, if I want to replicate it, I understand exactly if I'm getting the same result or not. So that's this. Then what I'm doing on top of that is I'm mixing some Poolish with it. And this one here is basically 100 grams of the same flour, the Molini Pizzuti, 100 grams of water, and 2 grams of dry yeast. And this one here, basically, it's been out of the fridge for an hour and then in the fridge overnight, and pretty much just come out of the fridge. And you can see how it's all nice and bubbly. So this here, the Poolish, basically will act as your yeast or your starter, if you like. The reason why I like to use the Biga is I prefer the flavor of the Biga in my pizza dough. So, so what I do is I just blend both. No reason, it's just a personal preference. Now the rest of the flour is again the Molino Pizzuti. And also what I've done is I've used a Caputo. I'll show you this flour. It's the Tipo Uno by Caputo. And so basically in the recipe it'll be 900 grams of the Molino Pizzuti and just 100 grams of the Tipo Uno by Caputo. The reason why I mix this in there is I personally like the flavor it gives the dough, but you don't have to put this in there if you can't get it, or if you can get something similar, go for it. I don't put any more than 100 grams, otherwise then it just becomes too much personally. Now we've got 30 grams of salt. Now why 30 grams? That's my personal preference in the taste. I've tried using less, but I don't like it. All right, so the first step is we're going to break the Biga and put it in pieces in the mixer. So I'll do that, and you can see me do that quickly. So the reason why I'm doing this is so you can see the performance of the mixer, see how it mixes and whether it does a job to the expectation of most of you, considering that most of us haven't owned a mixer like this before, and we're watching videos of the more expensive ones. Just like myself, my concern is it going to perform like those mixers? I have used this a few times now, so I can tell you that, look, you have to get used to it and try a few times before you get it right. And it seems to be doing a pretty good job. So you can see I'm just going to break up the Biga in pieces. So as soon as this is done, the next step is pouring in the flour. So there's no method really, just or science behind what I'm doing, other than just breaking it and putting it in there. The reason why I break it up is just to make sure that you get an even distribution as it mixes. The other thing I will point out with this mixer that I actually really like, now online, when you're watching videos, the one common thing that I notice is when the mixer is mixing, you get all the dry flour around the edges. A lot of them struggle to gather that flour, and you'll see a lot of people get a scraper and put it to the edge as it's mixing to scrape that flour away from the walls, especially here where it concaves. This mixer, you don't really have to do that. It actually, if you give it enough time, it gathers it all by itself. And I actually like that because I never have to put my scraper in there to get that flour that it hasn't grabbed to go mix in with the rest of it. It just does it on its own. Especially when you start pouring a little bit of water at a time to get it to a higher hydration. If there is any flour stuck there, it will just grab it for you as you're doing that. All right, so the Biga's in there. So you can see my container's all empty. So the next step is we're going to add the flour. So there's the flour. Oops, sorry. So I just pour it in there. Try and get it all over the Biga, cover it all. There you go. So that's all in there. Sorry, excuse the plate in front of the camera. All right, so just close your net. Now, I just like to start it. Now, the speed that I'm on right now is 3, and then you just start pouring your water. Oh, sorry, hold on, wrong container. So we're going to use the bigger one. So that's 450 mils of water going in. And you just pour it in slowly. So you can see how it's mixing everything. So again, just to remind you, in the Biga, you've got 100 ml of water with 200 grams of flour, and this is 450 grams of water, or 450 mils. So that brings it up to 550 at the moment. So once I add the Poolish in there, that'll bring it up to 650 in hydration. Now, I won't cut the video. What I'll do is I'll just let it play out. If you don't hear me talking, I've just got nothing to say. I just want you to watch how it's mixing everything. So as it's turning, you can start to see on the sides of the bowl, it's starting to take away some of that dry flour. So as the main bulk of the dough shifts position within the bowl, once it sort of touches those edges where you've got some of that remainder of flour, it will gather all that up for you. So once we increase the speed and we add a little the Poolish and we add more water, it will clean it all out. So we'll wait another minute or two. Again, the speed is on 3, and then we'll add the Poolish. So the main thing, what I'm trying to achieve here right now is just to get enough of that gluten mesh to develop. So that's why we're allowing it to mix slowly, just to make sure that it incorporates that Biga into the rest of that flour. And we just lose some of that roughness in the texture of the dough. So within another maybe minute, we should start seeing that. But you can see it's already formed the pumpkin. The one thing I will say is that I have found with this particular mixer, if you're doing a direct dough, so that's without using your pre-fermented, whether it's a Biga or a Poolish, I've noticed that if you do go to high hydration, the mixer struggles a little bit. What I mean by that is I find that once I sort of go above that 65-70% of hydration, the dough tends to stick to everything, the hook and the bowl a little bit. But when you use Biga or Poolish, because it's kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of like an autolyse in a way. So you get that effect where it allows you to put in more water, so you can get that dough to a higher hydration, and it doesn't tend to stick to the bowl and the hook as much. So you'll see that. So you can see that the dough is starting to smooth out a little bit. Now it still doesn't have, I'll stop it for a sec. So if you want to do that window pane test, at the moment it still breaks. It's still pretty rough. So what we'll do is I'll add the Biga to this now, the Poolish, and then we'll continue mixing. So here's the Poolish. As you can see, it's all bubbly. So all I do is just use a scraper, and I just split it up, and I just put it in. And I just put it on top of the dough like that. And I try to put it on every angle or every corner of it. So you try and get that even distribution. Now, I'm a bit obsessive compulsive, so I like to try and scrape every little ounce of dough that is stuck on the bowl if I can. So yeah, that's not bad. I think I've gotten most of it. I've washed my hands so they're clean. There you go. So that's pretty much all of it in there. So we'll close the lid and we'll get that mixing. Now, when you do close the lid, it doesn't start automatically. You do need to turn the dial back down to 0 and then turn it back up to the speed that you want it. So we're back on 3 right now. So and what we'll do is I'm going to add a little bit of water and we'll get that mixing. The one thing that it does sometimes, not all the time, is if the dough gets stuck on the hook, it tends to have a tendency to climb the hook. So that's the only time I find it. I have to stop the mixer to get that dough off the hook before it hits the top where the bolts are. But what we'll do is we'll bring the speed up to about 3.5 and we'll just watch it mix. So what I'm waiting for now is you can sort of see the dough from the bottom of the bowl is starting to gather up all that water. So it's starting to unstick from the bottom of the bowl. And you can see the dough is also starting to smooth out a bit. So we'll wait another minute or so and then we'll start adding a little bit more water. Then we'll put the salt in there as well. And then we'll bring it up to that 80% hydration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pouring a little bit of water. Now we'll just drip it a little bit at a time. We don't want to put too much in there where you break up the dough. Because if you do that, then it tends to struggle to gather itself back up. And then it also struggles to absorb more water. So what we'll do is we'll also bring the speed up in a minute. Now the reason why I don't put the speed up right now is because what I want to do is do most of my mixing at a lower speed. So we want to reduce heating the dough too much. The one thing I like about this machine is it doesn't heat the dough up too much, but it does if you run it on a higher speed for too long. It is also chain driven. I think there's only a belt from the main motor to the actual mechanism, but the rest of it is all chain driven underneath and on top. So what I'll do now is I'm going to put in the 30 grams of salt. So in total now, that's 1 kilo of flour. So it's 900 grams of the Molini Pizzuti, the Costa d'Amalfi, and then the 100 grams of the Caputo Tipo Uno in there, which gives that sort of whole grain look to the dough. So we'll just pour in the salt. There's no science behind what I'm doing. I just pour it all in. Some people like to pour it in slowly, but I find it because you put so much water in there, especially the 80% hydration, by the time it's all done mixing, it will have distributed throughout the dough evenly. So once I put in the salt, I like to put in a little bit of water just to help the salt. So also, if you look at the bowl now, you can see that I've not put a scraper in there once, but it's gathered all that flour around the edges. And that's what I really like about this mixer, that I've noticed that the better brands or the more expensive brands don't do very well. And that's why I said to you, you always see that people put a scraper in there to get the dough off the edges. And I've even heard on some of the videos, some of the guys say that you've got to scrape it because it just doesn't gather it very well. So I can vouch for this machine that you don't have to do any of that. So also you can start to see that the dough has absorbed all the water. See, it's coming off the bowl again. So what we'll do now, there's about 100 mils left in this container to bring me to 80% hydration. So what we're going to do is we'll put the speed up. Now, I will also add that I've never really needed to go above 6 when it comes to speed to get to a higher hydration. And I really like that because it just gives you options to increase that speed if you need to go even further. So I'll show you. We'll go now. This is 6. So you have to excuse the table wobbles a little bit. It's not 100% stable. So what I'll do is I'll bring it down to 5. Let's try and see if it doesn't make much of a difference. But that's on 5 anyway. So we'll let that water absorb and then we'll pour some more in there. And again, we're just putting in a little bit at a time. So you see how it grabs the water and it balls up again and then goes back to looking kind of like a pumpkin. So that's where I add some more. There you go. So about 10 ml every time I pour it. So about 10 times and then we should be there. So see how it sort of falls apart or breaks down a little bit. And then it gathers it all up as it absorbs the water that is around the bowl. And again, it's cleaned the ball really nicely. So it gathers up again, and then we're just gonna pour a little bit more. So I'm gonna go up in speed. You're gonna have to forgive the wobble of the table. So that's on 6. So I'm not going any higher. So I find that that's plenty. So you can also hear the dough starting to pop. Again, we'll pour some more. You can start to see it's nice and smooth and it's lifting off the bowl. We'll pour a little bit more water. So you can see how much water I've got left there. Probably about 30-40 mils. And the machine's really quiet. It might probably come across loud on the microphone because I've got the phone really close to it, but it's very quiet. If I have it on the bench, there's no vibration at all. See, again, see how we gathered all that water. It's lifting off the bowl nicely. It's getting really smooth. I add some more water then. So you're just wanting the gluten to really absorb that water, because if you go too fast, then what tends to happen is and you'll see it, that the water comes out on the surface of that dough. So you can see that then the dough's not really absorbing it as well. So you don't want to rush it, and that's something that you're really going to learn just through experimentation. So you can see the dough's lifting up again. Now what I said to you earlier about that if you're not using your pre-fermented doughs like Biga or Poolish, I find that it struggles to get to a higher hydration. See, it's lifting off the bowl. If I was just to put the flour and yeast directly into the bowl, once you get to 70%, you find that it doesn't lift like that off the bowl. So the flour sticks to the bowl, so it doesn't form that gluten structure as well. So I'm not sure if it's a problem with the actual breaker bar or the shape of the hook itself, but it certainly doesn't have that problem when you use your pre-fermented doughs like Biga and Poolish. So we'll put in some more water. There you go. We've got maybe 20 mils left. And look, I don't stick to a time as far as mixing. I know some people say, oh, mix 6 minutes on low speed and then 6 minutes on high. I just go by, basically, because you tend to know when it's going to need more water. So you can see the dough starts to smooth out, lift off the bowl. So we can put more water. There you go, we've got another 10 mils to go, so we'll just let that absorb. Again, speed is on 6. We can go faster, but there's no need. So what I'll do is once I've put in the last bit of water that I've got here, I'll turn the speed up so at least you can see what happens, just for the purpose of the video. So in case anyone says, hey, can you do one with a higher speed, at least you can see what it does now. Alright, so we'll just let that absorb. Okay, and we'll just put in the last little bit of water. There you go, so we're finished with the water. And what I'll do is I'll turn the speed up. There you go. So that's on maximum. And you can see it's starting to gather up that water. And it's coming off the bowl again. So see how it's coming off the bowl nicely? So I could actually put more water. I think I could bring this to a higher hydration, but there's no need, because then you don't want a situation where when you go to make your pizza and you try to extend your dough, it's just too sticky and hard to work. Already 80% is quite high, but the reason why I'm doing it 80% is I want to really show you the performance of the machine. So there you go. So we'll bring that back down to, that's back down to 6. And I think the dough's pretty much ready to go. So we'll just give it another minute. Okay, that's it. So just one sec, I'll let it rest for a minute and I'll show you the strength of the gluten. So just grab it. So you can see it's formed that gluten net like before when I showed you. So you can see that. And see that? You can pretty much pull it off the bowl. It's almost clean. And look at that, 80%. So what I'll do is we'll pull it out of the bowl. Just give me a sec. And that way you can see how clean the machine is. And it's actually really clean to, really easy to clean the mixer. All I do is I pour warm water in there, and I use a sponge that doesn't have a scour on there. So that, because if you do, the dough will stick to the scour part of the sponge. But it's the actual dough itself comes nice and easy off the sponge as well. So I'll show you how I do that. And then to remove the dough, all I do is I wet my hands just to make sure it doesn't stick to my hands, and I just grab it and I just pull it out, and I just break it and I put it on my counter. So what I do is if you can't reach this, you just close your net and just make your machine turn slowly. And then you try and grab it because it balls it up for you. There you go. And look how clean that is. And that's 80% hydration. So what I'll do is I'll move my camera now just over to the bench so you can see the dough. There you go. And all I do now is just make it into one mass just by giving it a couple of folds just to strengthen it a little. But what I'll do is I'll wet my hands a little bit. So you can see it's not really sticking too much to the hands, but if you don't wet your hands, it will, because your hands tend to be always warm. So it will attract that dough to your hands. And all I'll do is just grab it, lift it, give it a couple of folds. There you go. So it's nice and smooth. There you go. Look at that. It's already got a nice big bubble on top. So now what I like to do is I'm going to cover this. I'm just going to let it rest for, say, 10-15 minutes while I clean the mixer. And then I will come back and give it another fold just to strengthen it a little bit. Now, the reason why I like to strengthen it a little bit, even though the mixer, you could say, has stressed out the dough, once it does relax, you don't want a situation where when you go to extend the dough to make your pizzas, where the dough is too weak, where basically it just stretches just while you're handling it. It doesn't have that strength where you need to work it a little bit. So you want a little bit of that elasticity in there. Not too much, but that's what these folds help you do. So anyway, I'll cover this and then we'll go clean the machine so you can see how I clean it. And all I'll do is I just put a bowl over it. So what I've got here is warm water. All we do is we pour it into the machine. Now this is the sponge I was telling you about that I use. See, there's no scouring pad on it. So you just put it in the bowl with the warm water and you just start wiping it. Now if you're thinking on how you're going to get the water out, I'll show you in a minute. The main thing is right now is just wipe it all down, get all that dry flour out of there. But because the mixer did a pretty good job mixing the dough, there's not much there. It's just, obviously it's in contact with that dough, so you're going to get smudges everywhere. But any dough that it sticks to this sponge, because it doesn't have that scouring pad, this just comes off. It comes off actually quite easy. And this is how you clean it. So you don't have to lift it or try to pour the water out of the mixer. A 32 kilos, you do not want to be trying to tilt this into your sink. You drop it, you're going to destroy everything. And because there is a bit of a gap underneath the breaker bar there, you can put the sponge underneath and get any of the dough that is underneath there. Now to get to the back wall, what I'll do is I'll just close the lid, turn the power on, and I just let it maneuver just so I can get to the other part. So you can see it's just over there now, the part that I couldn't get to. And what I'll do is once I get this water out, I will repeat the process with fresh water again, just to make sure that I've cleaned it properly. You don't want to use soap, because just keep in mind, you're mixing food with it. If you're not washing that soap out properly, that's going to go into your food. So then what I do is I grab my bowl, and then slowly with the sponge, and just squeeze it into there. And that's how easy it is to clean. 10 minutes and you've got it clean. Okay, so we've got some more clean water. Again, it's warm water. We'll just pour it in there again. And I like to do it a second time just to make sure that I've got absolutely every little bit of flour out of there. So yeah, as you can see, there's some flour there. It was under the breaker bar. There you go, just give it another wipe. Make sure it's all nice and clean. Just check your hook as well, because sometimes you can miss spots underneath, behind it. So just, but you can see that just a rinse under the tap, it's gotten rid of all that dough that's stuck to the sponge. This is just a little bit that is just grabbing now. And once I've taken this water out, what I'll do is I'll use a rag, a dry rag, or tea towel, and I just dry up the machine before I store it away. I don't like to leave it wet. Even though it's nicely painted, I don't want to, say, affect the paint or have something corrode on me, because I've left water on it. I want it to last a long time, so if you do the right thing, there's no reason why I shouldn't. But as far as the performance of the machine, works well. There's nothing that I can honestly tell you that I don't like about it. I don't have anything to compare it to as far as other mixers besides my KitchenAid. But apart from that, it's working well. I guess if you guys have any experience with this machine compared to others, you can leave some comments and tell me your story or your experience with it. So what you can also do is you can just press down the sponge and just get it underneath the breaker bar there, and just make sure that you've got any dough that is still underneath it out of there. But because you're not using soap, it's not too much a big deal. If there's a little bit dry there, I don't think it's going to harm anyone. And then what happens is once it dries, it will flake off without you having to work too hard to grab it out or scrape it off. So you can see I've pretty much got it clean now. It's just a little bit of water. What we'll do is we'll just spin the bowl around one more time just to see if we've missed anything. So we'll just close the net and just get it to turn. There you go. So that way we can get to any spots that we've missed. There you go. And then you just grab a fresh tea towel, nice clean one, and then you just start wiping it all dry before you put it away. I like to dry the hook, the breaker bar, even underneath here. Just check, because sometimes when it mixes it can splash up, so just check it. The beauty of this table is a stainless steel table that I got online. It was only about $130. It is a little bit wobbly, I think mostly due to the fact that the machine weighs so much, and once it starts moving, inevitably it's going to wobble a little bit, but it is stable. It just makes it easier to wheel in and out from where you're storing it. I like to keep it inside the house. Some people might want to keep it in the garage, or if you've got room in your pantry, or it looks quite nice. You can actually even leave it on your benches if you want. So there you go. It's actually nice and dry and clean now. There you go. So I don't know if you can see inside. Look at that. I'll see if I can get you a bit closer. You can see how nice and clean it is. There you go. Look at that. Look how clean it is. Like new. That's how easy. So it's pretty much now ready for the next time I need it. All right, guys. So if you just bear with me, I will put this away, and then we'll go back to the dough, and I'll give it another fold to strengthen it a little bit more. All right, so there you go. So the machine's all nice and clean and ready to be put away. So I hope the video that I've made so far helps you with regards to this particular machine and whether it might be right for you. I'm not making this video because I'm trying to tell you that this is the one for you to buy. I'm only simply making it because it is the machine that I decided to purchase, and there wasn't any video that was out there to help me make the decision on whether this particular machine was the correct one for me or not. So I'm just making it just so if it helps you guys with whether this is the one or a different one is the right one for you, at least you've got that information at hand. It certainly would have helped me with my decision making. Not to say that I'm not happy with the machine, because I can tell you I'm very happy with the machine. And there's nothing that I can honestly say that is bad about it. And again, I don't have any other, or I've never used another type of machine or brand where I can say, oh yeah, buy this one because it does this better or not. But look, for what I'm doing right now, it's working great. Maybe one day, I don't know, I'll upgrade, but there's no need as of this moment. And I've had this one now since the unboxing video. It's been about 3-4 months, and I've used it a few times and I've just had no issues with it at all. And it's a nice looking machine, as you can see. Like I said, I've had to buy this trolley stand. It's not commercial grade, but it's good enough for home use. You've even got the storage down the bottom so you can put your flour. And it holds the weight. but it's a nice machine. And then what I do when I do store it, I've kept the original plastic that it came with, and I just put it over the top so that way there's no dust that goes in the machine. So when I pull it out, I'm not having to clean it. So that's one thing I recommend. If you can put some sort of cover on top when you do store it away to make sure that nothing gets in there and gets it dirty. So all I do is I do put the lead in a plastic bag because I don't know where the lead's been, even though I've cleaned it. I just put it in the bowl. And then, so if I ever need access to that manual, it's always on hand. I don't like to lose stuff. And then just cover it. There you go. And then that goes underneath the stairs just like that for the next time I need to use it. So what we'll do is I'll just move you over to the dough. It's been about 20 minutes since we balled it. So what we'll do is we'll ball it up one more time. And then what we'll do is we'll leave it for another 10 minutes and then we'll make the balls and put them in the dough tray. And within about 5-6 hours, it should be ready for us to make some pizza. So I'll show you what it looks like. There you go. So it's had plenty of time to relax. And you can see it's already starting to form bubbles. So all we're going to do now is I've just wet my hands again, just to make sure it doesn't stick. It's pretty good. It shouldn't stick now, but we'll just give it another couple of folds to strengthen it. And then, like I said, we'll make some dough balls. There you go. And that's 80% hydration. So you can see that the mixer's done a really good job with mixing it. There you go. So we'll ball it up nicely. Look at that. 80% hydration. There you go. And we just cover it up. All right, let's wait 10 minutes and then we'll come back and let's make some dough balls. Okay, so it's been about 15 minutes since we balled it a second time. So I'll take the bowl off. And I've got the scales ready, so we're pretty much ready to ball it and put it in the pizza tray. All right, so I've got some flour just in case we need to put some flour in our hands, just in case it sticks. So let's start dividing it. I went a bit too over on this one. There you go. 300. All right, and then you just ball it. Now it is quite wet, so it will stick to your hands to some degree. So this is how I like to do it. Just make it into a nice ball. And you can sprinkle a little bit of dough to your tray if you want. Just a personal preference. Some people might say it affects the hydration of the dough. Personally, I don't think it does. Not enough to make a difference. And and then just make sure the bottom's closed, and then you just put your dough balls there. It's quite easy. So it will stick to some degree because it is 80%. But again, there's different techniques with how you want to fold your dough. This is the way I like to do it, just to minimize that sticking to your hands. But as you get better, you can probably find a better technique to do this. As you can see, it's already forming those air pockets. But it's the same principle as when you do your folds on the mass, the main mass of your dough. Same thing, you just do it on a smaller scale. There you go. You just roll it on your bench. It's nothing sticking on the bench. And you can probably see how smooth that is. And then to the touch, once you do ball it like that, it doesn't stick. So you can put a little bit of flour to your hands if you want, just to grab it. See, the bottom will stick, the top won't. But again, you grab it, you just pinch it, just to make sure you close it, and you just put it in your dough tray. There you go, fold it again, and then you just ball it. Just fold it underneath until it just smooths out. There you go. Now, and the beauty is it's mixed it so well that normally I find it that when you do fold it in on itself, if you do it too many times, it starts tearing. But I find it that if it mixes really nicely, it doesn't do that. See that? It actually is really strong. Then you just grab it. And for this, I don't wet my hands. I usually like to use flour. There you go. And then you just put it in your tray. Just a bit of flour. Again, I try not to put too much flour on the dough because if you do that, then when you try to pinch the bottom as you're rolling it, it won't stick together. So you just want a little bit just on your hands, just to help you with just making sure it doesn't stick, just until you ball it like that. There you go. And again, nice and smooth, doesn't stick to your hands. When you flip it, you can see the bottom's pretty much closed. If you put too much flour, what happens is it stays open, and then when you try to pinch it, that flour stops that from happening. So there you go. So there you go, nice closed dough ball in the pizza tray. And last one. And then we just fold that. There you go, that's closed. And then again, we pinch it just to make sure it's closed. There you go. And then in our pizza tray. So what I'll do is I'll show you the dough balls in the pizza tray. Just give me a sec, I'll just have to move there you go. The camera, so you can see that they're nice and smooth. So what we'll do is we'll let this rest. So it's about 2:30 right now. So we'll come back, say around 5:30, 6:30, once we're ready to make some pizzas, and we'll have a look at what they look like. But you can see they're nice and smooth. All right, guys, we'll see you shortly. Yeah, putting this in is going to be interesting. All right, and here she is. Look at that. Look at that crust. Underneath the pizza. Look at that. Perfect. Okay. And look at that. Look at the structure there. Looks amazing. Look at that. It's incredible. Look how puffy that's turned out. Look at the bottom. It looks amazing. Incredible.